Good rainy afternoon. William Theo here, hoping you stay warm and covered as I bring you PTV News now. And the weather today brought more rain, no thanks to the southwest monsoon, enhancing Typhoon Karina to dump precipitation in excess all over the megacity and beyond. More and more electronically gathered news reports kept pouring through since early morning of rising floodwaters from gutter to knee level in the streets of the megacity. So much so, the president saw it best to call off all government work and classes at all levels in the early afternoon in the best interest of school kinds and public servants, especially those who commute to and from home by public transportation. Suspension of work in private companies and offices, however, was left to their management heads. The state weather forecasting agency Pag-asa has reminded the public of persistent rainfall and flash flooding in the national capital region up to Thursday this week, with the active confluence of the southwest monsoon and Typhoon Karina. Meanwhile, it was supposed to be a much heralded visit by the leader of America's lifelong ally. Instead, it had been completely overshadowed by President Joe Biden's announcement of stepping down over the weekend. The Republican National Convention and failed Trump assassination try the entire week before. Still in all, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington, D.C. today without a ceasefire plan in place and amid major political events in the U.S. that has added even more uncertainty to U.S.-Israel relations at a critical moment in the war in Gaza. Netanyahu and Biden are slated to meet for talks on Thursday in the White House. Then he is scheduled for a face-off with presumptive Democrat presidential nominee and Vice President Kamala Harris in Indianapolis, Indiana, also this week. Though Netanyahu publicly says he stands neutral publicly on who he favors in the race for the U.S. presidency in November, it is clear he roots for the Trump and the Republicans who have shown more support for Israel's security agenda and are more forgiving of its extreme right-wing policies against the Palestinians.
Will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle that regardless who the American people choose as their next president, Israel remains America's indispensable and strong ally in the Middle East.
In other news, 2 Americans were convicted by Russian courts on baseless charges of espionage and subversive activities on Friday, namely Wall Street journalist Evan Gershkovich and Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty editor Alsu Kurmasheva. These latest convictions reinforce beliefs in the Western world and in freedom that Moscow is hell-bent to arbitrarily arrest American nationals who they can use as political bargaining chips against Washington, D.C. The details from this multi-correspondent VOA report.
In a closed-door trial Friday, Alsu Kurmasheva received a 6.5-year sentence for spreading what the Kremlin says is false information about the Russian army. The verdict appears linked to a book Kurmasheva helped edit about Russians opposed to the war in Ukraine. It is unclear if other charges are still pending against the journalist for VOA's sister network, Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty. RFERL President Stephen Capus called the trial a, quote, mockery of justice. Media groups are condemning Russia's actions.
This just shows again how these trials against these 2 American journalists, this one a Russian-American journalist, in Russia are obviously completely manipulated by Russian authorities.
Kurmasheva's verdict came the same day Russia convicted Evan Gershkovich. The Wall Street Journal reporter was sentenced to 16 years in prison on espionage charges that he denies. The US is demanding both Americans be released.
We remain focused on the case of Alsu Kurmasheva. She's a dedicated journalist who is being targeted by Russian authorities for her uncompromising commitment to speaking the truth and her principled reporting.
The convictions mark a rapid decline in media freedoms in Russia. The country ranks near the bottom of the World Press Freedom Index. And Moscow is detaining at least 22 journalists, more than half of whom are foreign nationals, says the Committee to Protect Journalists. RFERL External Affairs Chief Diane Zeleny says Kurmasheva's unjust detention and the risks for its journalists are a daily concern.
It is the new normal. It's sad to say. This is sort of the state of the world right now. Journalists are not safe anymore in many places, and the ways to help them are minimal, actually, and they are being targeted by authoritarian governments.
Komasheva's family in Prague says her detention hits at a personal level.
It would be one thing if she was only away from me for so long, but to know that she's in an unsafe place and that she's in danger and she's not comfortable, that's something that really makes me sad.
The Russian embassy did not respond to VOA's requests for comment. But in the case of gov't, the Kremlin has indicated it would be open to a prisoner swap. With Liam Scott in Prague and Christina Caseda-Smith in Washington, Jessica Jarit, VOA News.
And that's a wrap for this afternoon. Join us later tonight for the evening edition. This is William Theo reminding you to stay informed by catching the news right here. And thank you for watching PTV News Now.